Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. It is a great pleasure that Brian and I are going to have on Brent Elusive yet again for an update on his 490-day sequence. So we need to get some update from him personally. We've had so much going on in the news since our last broadcast. We need to get, his take on how the current events have been unraveling, shall we say. So, Brent, why don't you come on here and say hello to everybody and bring everybody up to speed about your thoughts on the current events since the last broadcast.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Great to be back. It's an eye-opener in every sense. I wrote a text the other day to a gentleman, and China wants Taiwan. Russia wants Japan's islands. Russia's in Syria. Israel is defending itself and attacking against Russia's wishes. It is just a mess, and things are about ready to boil over, in my opinion.
Well, unfortunately, not only I think that Brian would certainly agree that that's exactly what's going on. But, Brent, the little scope that you have there, oh my goodness, Brian has a much broader scope. What's going on in the Balkans, what's going on currently in Greece. It seems like to me that since our last broadcast, everything has gotten worse, not incrementally, but at a geometric rate. Things have literally picked up. So you sent me an update, and Brian's going to apply that to the video so everybody can take a firsthand look at your notes and the time spreads concerned. So this is going to be quite an endeavor. This is going to be the first time we have tested this software, but I have big hopes for the production that's going to come about tonight. Brian has just done so much labor over this. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So let's get Brian on here, and let's get his take on things, a brief thumbnail sketch of the current events and the strangeness that we have going on with Brent here, that you just have to shake your head. Things are picking up, and it just blows my mind how the majority of the American people they just aren't seeing any of it. It's game as usual. So, Brian, give us your take on things.
My take on things. I would have to agree with everything you guys just stated, because that's exactly what's been happening here. It's exploding worldwide. I'm not certain what else to say. We've discussed this a little bit, and I'm glad that Brent is bringing in this topic for discussion, because we really had to cover all these things anyway. So for the time being, that's what I'm going to add.
Well, we all need to consider this, that something else is majorly at play. Live, local, and light breaking, ladies and gentlemen. It's been all over the news that several states have issued their food stamps a month early just in case. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea what's going to happen if people don't get their food stamps. Cities will burn. You will see food stamp flash mobs. You can imagine just what one city, let's talk about Chicago. Don't you understand that with today's technology, let's just take all the women that receive assistance getting things like Infamil and Similac for their babies because they're lactose intolerant. Ladies and gentlemen, if all those mothers in one major city got on Twitter and decided to do a food stamp flash mob and set places on fire, you have no idea where this could go. It could get really live, local, and late breaking really quick. And I mean really quick. So far, the flash mobs have been basically harmless that I know of. But if you get a bunch of families that have no way to feed themselves, you're asking for trouble. You have no idea what you're talking about. I personally have dealt with these people in the various ministries, especially when I worked at the homeless shelter. You're not going to do that to these people. They'll burn your cities they will go to the rich neighborhoods and they'll burn them down. They will. Rich people are not going to do this to them. So in light of that, now this is real time. We have a real government shutdown, and several states are already very concerned about what their citizens are going to do. So they've issued food stamps a month ahead of time. This is real. Look it up in the news. With that in mind, God could set a match to all these complications going on in an instant. So with that in mind, Brent, you have the mic. You've put together a whole lot to discuss tonight, so let's get right to it. Let's really see what you found. Go right ahead, Brent.
Thank you, Matthew. And that match you talked about really is all it will take. I've gone over a lot of this information in the past on another broadcast, but more has come to light with even a word of knowledge being given to me about the future. So I ask that you bear with me as I try to put the information in a format that will explain old things and new and set up future broadcasts for a better understanding of things. I am and have been a watchman since about 2009, when God gave me some information that I have been following since then. It has been a rabbit trail of looking up at the signs in the heavens and then looking back down at the effects and correlations of events that have manifested on earth in the forms of harbingers in the lives of men. Without realizing how and why I was receiving this information at the time, I now, with hindsight, being 2020, have been receiving words of knowledge from the creator of heaven and earth. It started with me looking for answers for the timing of the last days, which from the beginning, after I was saved, was an unconscious drive of wanting to see, to know, and to understand what the God of the Bible was telling me and telling us. I understand that, excuse me, most will probably disagree with my conclusions, but the evidences for them is going to be hard to deny, if not impossible. Most of what I will share, I have searched out myself and found, but other information has come from other sources. The things that have come from other sources are only mentioned because they fit the patterns and signs that I have been shown to make a bigger and better picture for us to see. As an example, I just recently found out about the Bethlehem star. And That's just one example. I've been watching a pattern of harbingers since 2010 and before, and the results has brought me to some conclusions that have been correct in their timing in these sequences of patterns and harbingers to the day, and may continue to be correct in our future. Please look at the dates and timing of these harbingers when they're put up or on show notes that were and are accurate to the day. When I use two dates as a point of reference, for instance, the 9th/10th, it is because we are dealing with God's word, his people, and his land. That is a day ahead of us on our calendar here in America. And because according to God, the day starts at sunset and puts a date by God's reckoning between two dates of our reckoning. So giving a buffer of a day for God's real time frame seems to be reasonable and still fits accurately. This is not an excuse for error because most are within these time frames to the day by America's time frame, which is where my point of reference is. These are the signs in the heavens that I have been watching and correlating to real-time events with biblical numbers of last day significance. These are the signs in our days pointing to the Temple Mount and what is coming to fulfill biblical prophecy right before our eyes. Excuse me. These are and have been the signs in the heavens pointing to earthly events that have been accurate to the day, and I believe will continue to be. There is absolutely no question these signs in the heavens are showing signs in the earth with biblical prophecy timelines that are being fulfilled to the day and are of great significance to all mankind, whether we know it or not. I would say that something historic, life-changing, earth-shifting, and even heaven-shaking is going to happen in our very near future. Being given a word of knowledge is not the same as a word of wisdom. So I cannot say that my interpretations on these signs is 100% correct. But the signs themselves are pointing to things that I feel can be known, and I will give you at this time my best understanding and interpretation of them. As I've said in a previous broadcast, I'm just a child that has been given a toy and is trying to figure out how it works. With that being said, there are many things that can't be denied that I'm going to share with you in the hopes that we can all have a better understanding of where we are and what is coming, and perhaps even when. I understand that that's a bold statement. I am not date setting per se. I am not date setting per se. I am seeing patterns of harbingers that are pointing to things that men have no authority or control over, as far as the events in the heavens are concerned. But when is the big question? And as Jesus said in Matthew 24:43, but know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. I'm not predicting the rapture date because it is clear by scripture that no one will know the day or the hour. But what about the season? What about all the warnings and clues that have been given in God's word, letting us know that as 1 Thessalonians 5:4 says, but ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. The actual numbers of times that the last days time frames are spoken of are really very few, but they are enormously significant and important. And two of these number time periods, the 1,290 day and the 1,335 days, are only mentioned once. Daniel is told, go your way, Daniel, because the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end, which is an interesting statement considering that the last 7 years starts the first seal being opened. Sealed until the time of the end? Well, it's going to be revealed at the time of the end. And the book of Revelation confirms that these things were not only after Daniel's time, but for a future generation well past John's, the writer of Revelation. Before I get into the scripture verses, Matthew, would you like to, or Brian, would you like to jump in and say anything?
Well, as far as myself would go, I take great pause at what you said. A word of knowledge is not the same as a word of wisdom. What a very interesting thing to say. I am very surprised that you put it that way, acknowledging the simple fact that there's a big difference between the two. And you're right, there's a lot that you don't understand. There's a lot I don't understand. There's a lot that Brian don't understand. But right now, I hope that we shine just a little brighter than we did before. I appreciate your comments. And, well, that's why we bring you on. So, Brian, did you have anything that you wanted to add before he gets started?
I don't know if Brian walked away or he's just speechless. But I will continue now unless he would like to interrupt, and that's fine. The scripture verses relevant to the last 7 years, plainly written for us to read, are as follows. Daniel 7:25, speaking of the Antichrist. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and laws. The saints will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. This is understood to be a 3.5-year period, or 1,260 days. And in my opinion, it will be the last 3.5 years of the 7-year period. Because 2 Thessalonians 2:3 says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there comes a falling away first, and that man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. And as Jesus said in Matthew 24:15 and 16, when you therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. Daniel 9:24. 77s are decreed for your people. 77s is 490 days. These numbers are tremendously significant. They're going to repeat themselves in these scriptures, and it's because they're so significant. Daniel 9:25, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens, which is 69 sevens for a total of 483 years, leaving 1 7-year period to be fulfilled, which is explained by Daniel 9:27. Daniel 9:27, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end is decreed, is poured out upon him. In the middle of the 7, a 7-year period, in the middle is 1,260 days, or 2,520 days for the whole 7 years. I would like to point out a couple things here. Despite almost everyone agreeing that the most here spoken of is the Jews, I myself have my doubts for various reasons, but will not go into it now. I believe that the interlinear Bible, the Hebrew, Greek, and English, excuse me, is probably more accurate when it says, and on a corner of the altar, desolating abominations, instead of on a wing of the temple. And that particular subject gets complicated. Again, my interpretation is what it is, and it may not be correct, but at this time. And as you may or may not know, on December 10th, 2018, in Jerusalem, 70 nations were invited on the last day of Hanukkah to celebrate the dedication of the new altar for the new temple. And you will see later on how 1,260-day time frame fits that. Daniel 12:7. It will be for a time, times, and half a time. Again, a 3.5-year period. Daniel 12:11. From the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. The only time those two numbers are mentioned in the entire Bible, at least plainly. And yet the significance of them is beyond our comprehension. And that's why when these numbers show up in the sequences, in the patterns, in the harbingers, with significant dates and events on earth, it's time to pay attention. Before we go to the numbers in Revelation, which coincide with the same numbers in Daniel, I would like to point out a few other sevens in Daniel. All of these are speaking about King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel wrote and was given these numbers and a 490-year pattern, which is 70 times 7. There's the 7 is so important in God's time frames that I found it interesting. Daniel 3:19. He ordered the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar, 7 times hotter than usual. Why not 6? Why not 10? 7 times hotter. Daniel 4:16. Let his mind be changed. Let Nebuchadnezzar's mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given a mind of an animal, till 7 times, 7 years pass by him. Daniel 4:23. I mean, it just keeps repeating itself, punctuating more than just the number 7. Let him live like wild animals until 7 times pass by for him. 7 years. This last verse is repeated, so I'll only read it once, but it is repeated for word in another verse. 7 times will pass by for you, talking about Nebuchadnezzar, until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. Now, Revelation, thousands of years after Daniel, well, I'm not exactly sure how long after Daniel. From my point right now, it's been thousands of years since it was written. Revelation 11:2. And the holy city shall be tread underfoot 40 months. That's one of the only places that's specific about a 7-year period, 2,520 days. Break that in half, 1,260 days, a 3.5-year period. Revelations 11:3, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. 1,260 days or 3.5 years. Once again, I believe that they will be prophesying during the last 3.5 years, and that they will be Enoch and Elijah. That can be controversial. I mean, we've got controversy going in all over the place. Rapture, no rapture. When's the rapture? Enoch, Elijah, Moses. This is my opinion. And Revelations 12:6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had the place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Again, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. And who I think these are and what happens to them is for another time, and it's controversial, what I think. Revelations 12:14. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the face of the serpent. 3.5 years again. We're almost done here. There really aren't that many places where it speaks of this as far as how important it is. Again, 1,260 days or 3.5 years. Revelations 13:5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months, 7 years. Again, 42 months equaling 7 years, 2,520 days. Daniel's 70 weeks is a 490-year period. The numbers described in Daniel are 1,150. 1,260, 1,290, 1,335, and 42 months, 2,520. All are numbers within Daniel's 70th week and are the last 7 years in the 490 years. Matthew or Brian, would you like to do any commenting at this time?
Brian, I took a shot at it last time. Would you like to offer comments? If you do, you can go ahead and interrupt me at your leisure. There is no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that this time sequence in the Bible is absolutely detrimental. This, as I call it, the secula of time, this fold of time, absolutely repeated, just like Brent shared. And it sticks you in the eye, well, like a sore thumb. One thing is for sure, when we look at these folds of time in reciprocation, we know that just for one, we know that we had Antiochus Epiphanes and the temple. Then, of course, came Titus. These things are isochronal in their nature. And one thing is for sure, it definitely states that these things are for the time of the end. Of that, there can be no mistakes. So the encoding of time here is meant not only for the advent of Christ's birth, the advent of Christ's crucifixion, the advent of his resurrection. It most certainly must pertain to Christ re-entering the timeline. There can be no doubt to that. Brian, did you want to offer any comments before Brent continues? Brent, go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. I don't think we lost him, but he's probably busy back there someplace. The numbers 490, 1,150, 1,260, 1,290, 1,335, and 2,520. Daytime frames are all pointing to the Temple Mount and have been connected to the blood moons, the galactic alignment, and events on Earth politically, and with the feasts of the Lord of religious significance that have happened in their time frames and sequences right before our eyes. I know of nowhere else that these numbers have any significance when they're put together other than in the Bible. And yet we're going to see right now some amazing things that are signs in the heavens. So with that, let's consider a few things. Excuse me. The last blood moon, and we just had one last night, and in all honesty, I have no idea what that meant. I know it was on the second anniversary of Trump's inauguration. I know it has significance. I have not been given any information on that as of yet, but there's no telling when that information could show up, or if it was just a period at the end of God's sentence before, as Matthew said, the match is being lit. The last blood moon of 1968 on Sukkot, going back 490 days, was on June 5th, 1967. That was the start of the Six-Day War that gave Israel Jerusalem after almost 2,000 years, and it was a sign in the heavens and a harbinger. The galactic alignment of December 25th, 2012, a sign is always given before the actual event, which was, they say, December 21st. And it pointed to the blood moons of 2014 and 2015. So we have a galactic alignment, a huge sign in the skies pointing to blood moons. With April 29, 2014, falling 14 days into the blood moons and being 490 days after December 25th, 2012, the last day of a 9-month peace negotiation between the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinians that was not ratified, but was a big sign in the heavens and a harbinger. The first example I gave you was in 1968. It was about Israel, 490 days. The second one is, again, has to do with a peace treaty with Israel falling 490 days to the day from a galactic alignment in the blood moons that are showing things, and I'm going to show you, that are just uncanny and remarkable in what they're showing. Considering that each of the 4 blood moons was on a feast day of the Lord, the first on Passover, the second on Sukkot, the third on Passover again, and the fourth on Sukkot again, pointing to Israel, the Jewish people, the land. There were 3 feasts that the people had to be in Israel, in Jerusalem. 2 of these was Passover and Sukkot, pointing directly to the land that God is taking care of all this time. April 10th, 2014, 5 days before the blood moons, was 1,335 days before President Trump declared Jerusalem Israel's capital on December 6, 2017, which was a sign in the heavens and a harbinger. Again, on April 10th, 2014, was 5 days before the blood moons, but this time it was 1,260 days before the Revelation 12 sign in the heavens, the woman in the heavens, on September 21st, 22nd, 2017, and was a sign and a harbinger. April 10th, 2014, April 10th, 2014. And yet 1,335 days, 1,260 days major events. People saw this. The world cringed at Trump declaring Jerusalem, Israel's capital. The world waited with bated breath at the Revelation 12 sign, but they were signs. They were pointing to things. Considering that 490 days before the first blood moon was Hanukkah, and that points to the temple. It points to a rededication of the temple. What happens in the last days? The temple is set up, a rededication of a temple. Considering that 490 days before the second blood moon was a holiday celebrating the ascension of Muhammad to heaven from the Temple Mount, so they say, again, 490 days before a blood moon, we have the celebration of Hanukkah. We have the celebration of a man going to heaven on a steed, so they say, from the Temple Mount. The first and second blood moons. The third blood moon, 490 days before that, was Hanukkah again, pointing to the Temple Mount. Considering that 490 days before the fourth blood moon and the last blood moon was a holiday celebrating Muhammad's ascension again. Now, this date here, 490 days before the last blood moon, May 26, 2014, December 6, 2017, the day that Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, was 1,290 days after May 26th, 2014, which was 490 days before the last blood moon. This should take your breath away. This should want you to get on your knees to find out if what I'm telling you, what I'm showing you, what I'm giving you has any relevance to your life. And believe me, it does. 490 days after the last blood moon, on January 30th, 2017, was the exact day that the second temple was completed on January 30th, 516 BC. 490 days after the last blood moon, again on January 30th, 2017, was the day that the new Sanhedrin, after 1,400 years, officially presented a new temple tax coin, the half shekel. I consider those two events on the same day of January 30th, millennia apart, as two witnesses to the 490-day patterns of the signs of before the blood moons. Matthew and Brian, would you like to say anything?
So far, absolutely. Well, I wish I could say jubilant, but I would say ominous. That's the phraseology I would give it. And you know, what bothers me is you stated that it should put people into check when we have the majority of Christianity today that don't want any a part of that at all. They actually believe in their heart of hearts that, well, they shouldn't have to repent of anything. I mean, here where I'm at, we have a great swath of a particular denomination, and they were baptized into that church when they were babies, and that makes them Christians. And believe me, I've tried breaking this, breaking the water with them, and you're not going to do it. They have never repented of anything. They have been literally taught since day one they don't have to. They were baptized into that church. They're Christians. They're going to heaven. And at this point in time, especially the ones that are, you know, in their 50s and above, they take great offense at you saying that they should have to, you know, become a Christian. Oh my goodness, they get upset. In their minds, they don't realize that a Christian should act any different than anybody else. And they don't understand, you know, whenever you say, uh, well, isn't a Christian supposed to, you know, have a list of things they do? And the only reply they'll have to that is, well, you get more crowns if you do good works. And I reply to that, so you don't need to act any way different. Oh no. And of course they use curse words when they say that. But you need to understand, Brent, they've been taught this their whole lives. This is what they learned in Sunday school. This is, and of course they don't have sermons. They have readings. You understand. This is one of those denominations that they just read what they're given for that particular Sunday, and that's all they've ever gotten. They've never even heard a real sermon. So we're way down the road. And of course, a lot of people take umbrage when you say that, well, what about the Eastern Orthodox, or what about, you know, the Catholics, if they're Baptist or some other thing? Well, I hate to tell everybody, they are Christians. They serve Christ. But these denominations too, they don't think they need to have a personal relationship with Christ or ask forgiveness for anything. If they do something during the week, they can take care of that at Mass. And this thought in their head that, you know, if they don't make it to Mass, if they die the day before, their priest can just pray them out of purgatory. You're really dealing with the same thing as you are the Protestants. I mean, they were baptized into church when they was a baby, so they tell everybody, and they firmly believe in their heart, they're Christians. And you can't convince them otherwise. So that really is disturbing, that God is obviously going to have to, well, start a bonfire to get people's attention. Now, with that being said, it is obvious in light of this present situation that at the very least, this is what Christ was referring to, that we was going to have trials and tribulations. The simple fact that we're talking about the majority of Christianity thinks this way. They think they can do whatever they want and go to heaven. They can act any way they want and go to heaven because they've been stamped a Christian. So it should be obvious and evident to the rest of us who know better that this is actually necessary. When it does happen, we don't need to take umbrage to it, just like the children of Israel did whenever Pharaoh got mad at Moses. So they took all the way the straw and made them to make the same quota of bricks. And, you know, that upset the children of Israel. They got mad at Moses. When this type of thing happens again, we need to realize that now this is needed for them, because they have no idea that they need to act or be any different than the lawlessness and the godlessness that exist around them at the workplace, their friends, their neighbors. So, Brian, did you want to offer any comments on that? But you and I have talked about that many times. But Brian, would you like to give commentary to that?
Sorry about that. At the current moment, no, just because of the reasons that you just stated. We have that's one of those topics that's just kind of left said for the time being, I would have to state, for keeping it simple anyways.
Well, amen to that. And you know, it's such a terrible thing to have to say that. Keep it simple in the present light of things. Before we go any further, just remember that the Lord yourself told you all this, that night was coming when no good deed could be done. Brent?
Thank you, Matthew. Truly, because what I'm sharing here is evidences of the days that we are in and coming to. I have said nothing about salvation, about Christ, and the relationship we have to have with him. You brought that out. That is what my message needs. And the people who see these things and realize that they have significance needs to hear. I have not said anything about that. I am so thankful you have. In the middle of the blood moons, there was a total solar eclipse, March 20th, 2015. And 1,150 days later was May 13th/14th, the anniversary of Israel's Independence Day and the day the United States opened its U.S. Embassy in Israel. Somebody should fall off their chair right now. Israel uses another calendar that is a floating calendar, and their Independence Day changes from dates from year to year. But as far as ours goes, it's always May 14th. And from that lunar eclipse, I haven't shown it tonight, but each one of these blood moons and this eclipse have two witnesses with them. Considering that 1,200 days after the total solar eclipse in the middle of the blood moons was the last day of Sukkot on September 30th, 2018, that's the second witness there for the total solar eclipse, one day being 1,150, which is 2,300 evenings and mornings, and the other 1,290, only spoken of once in Scripture. Considering that June 30th, 2015, in the middle of the four blood moons, was another sign in the heavens that I've just recently become aware of. I'm sure Matthew was all over this at the time. We may have even spoken about it, but we have so little time intervals that I do not remember, but I'm almost positive he's completely aware of this. It was an alignment of Venus and Jupiter in such a close conjunction that it looked like one star in the sky. And it was called the Bethlehem star, or the Messiah star. And it was in the constellation of Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. From that day, on June 30th, 2015 to December 10th, 2018, was 1,260 days. It was the last day of Hanukkah, and it was the day that they dedicated the new altar for the new temple, with 70 nations invited to the celebration. Okay, more people need to fall off their chairs now. Get back up, rewind this, and listen to that again. We're talking about solar eclipses, blood moons, signs in the heavens. January 19th, 2019 is 40. This week has been very interesting. When I speak of these signs, it's to show God's handwriting on the timing of things. I'm not saying this is going to happen or that's going to happen. He says it himself. He says 1,290 days after this point that I've shown you a sign, this is going to happen. And then we look at it. But January has been an interesting month. The 19th was 40 days after the dedication of the new altar for the new temple. It was the blood moon, January 20th, and fell on the second anniversary of Trump and his inauguration. And let's go back for a minute. Trump is the one who condoned Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And it's on a blood moon. When the blood moon is pointing to Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount needs to be set up for the end days. January 21st was yesterday. Will be another alignment of Venus and Jupiter with a less conjunction. And this time it will be in the constellation of Ophiuchus. I don't even know if I said that right. The serpent bearer. It was in the constellation of Leo before, and now it's in the constellation of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. The serpent bearer, which in Roman era mythology was to prevent the entire human race from becoming immortal. I had a scripture about immortality that I didn't put in here, but we are going from mortal to immortal with the blood of Christ through salvation into the kingdom of God. And the serpent bearer, or the serpent, is trying to keep us from it. January 26th, 2019 is 490 days after the revelation sign in the heavens, the woman in the heavens. I can't say anything about this as far as what's going to happen. Too many people have seen the blood moons and said, the blood moon, something's going to happen on that day. They've seen the sign of the woman in the heavens, something's going to happen on that day. No, these are signs pointing to things. I was given a word of knowledge recently. As I explained at the very beginning, I didn't realize what it was at first. Last year, December 25th, 2017, I got a download, which I now realize was a word of knowledge. And the Lord showed me that on April 10th, 2014, 5 days before the blood moons, was 1,335 days before Trump declared Jerusalem as capital. Again, considering April 10th again was 5 days before the blood moon and was 1,260 days before the revelation sign in the heavens. This was something that the Lord showed me. And he showed me also May 26th, 2014 was 490 days before the last blood moon, which was 1,260 days before December 6th, 2017, which was the day Trump declared Jerusalem Israel's capital. I got a hold of Matthew. We did a show about it, and there have been things added to this. December 14th, 2018, I was given a word of knowledge and confirmed. It was confirmed the next day to me, December 15th, 2018, the day Australia accepted Jerusalem as Israel's capital. That was an exclamation point. Because what he showed me on December 14th, let me say it again. I'm not date setting, and this will not be the rapture or even obviously the abomination that causes desolation. But it would seem to be a very large move on the chessboard of the world. that will have the rest of the pieces scrambling to position themselves for safety and will probably set in motion biblical prophecy swiftly. We will see. The Lord showed me on December 14th, 2018, that April 10th, I have it here as 9th/10th, 2019, is 490 days after Trump declared Jerusalem Israel's capital. If you've been following along, April 10th, 2014, there were two witnesses. Now we have April 10th again, 2 years apart. He showed me that April 10th, 2019 is 1,290 days after the last blood moon of 2015. You can't tie these numbers in with these events without having a knot that is completely unable to be unknotted. It is. He showed me that on December 25th, 2018, was 490 days after the great solar eclipse over America. He showed me this on December 14th, 2018, and it can be confirmed and verified by going to 2018 and January 3rd, 2019. And then it happened. This was given to me on the 14th, and then it happened. December 25th, 2018, Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu's coalition collapses. Israel heading to elections on April 9th, 2019. Early elections that did not come in the time set for the elections. April 9th or April 10th is 490 days after Trump declared Jerusalem Israel's capital. April 10th, 2019 is 1,290 days after the last blood moon. December 25th, when the decision was made, was 490 days after the great solar eclipse of America. And to top it all off, the Associated Press, December 30th, 2018, Israel hardline minister to form new party ahead of vote. That was a confirmation on the word of knowledge, and it seems to fulfill itself in and of the dates. But I think there's more to it, and we will have to wait and see what the elections bring and the effects of the new party and what implications all of this has on the peace deal, Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount. Matthew or Brian, would you like to say anything?
Well, there's no doubt about it that the correlation with the dates and the events is actually breathtaking once you take a look at them, once you scrutinize them. That, if anything, this is events being played out to the beat of a drum or a beat of a clock, a tick of a clock. These events laid out in such fashion I think you have stated it correctly. They were each in of themselves a harbinger of an event that was going to be triggered in a quantifiable length of time. A quantifiable length of time. And you're not the only one who could do the math on this. But these weapons of mass distractions that have taken the American people by storm. I mean, literally by storm. It is so difficult to even have an intelligent conversation nowadays with fellow Christians. It's alarming that they're not stopping to smell the roses. Because if they would at least do that, when they reach down to grab the rose to pull it close to their face, they would at least feel the prick. But, you know, the entertainment industry, the gaming now, the endless distractions. It is obvious that if you just sit down long enough to do the simple math, God has certainly been trying to get their attention. There's no doubt with that, with me. Brian, your comments.
Well, I have been looking over his show notes here in the background and taking a look at the PowerPoint as well on my phone so that I obviously don't put extra drag onto our system. And there's one specific spot that you had just brought up concerning what just happened here with Netanyahu's Likud party. All those events that transpired near the end of last year and then started rolling forward into the beginning of this year. That's one of those topics right now that, and this is almost, I should probably just state this before going much further. It's sort of like that with just about every media news event topic that is going on in the world as we speak. They seem to be in a constant state of perpetual motion. And to make matters worse, many people have probably gotten used to this within the last couple of years news cycle. You're dealing with deja vu every time you go to look at the news well, with me, I obviously look at it more than once a week. But nonetheless, every time I go in and look, it's just nonstop deja vu because the same stories continue to be somehow put on the recycle loop and they keep just recycling the same garbage. Perfect example here would be, some of the infamous announcements that keep happening here in the United States in the mainstream media, for instance, with Donald Trump. They keep replaying this stuff on a repetition and a loop, and you can't even tell if it's a new story, if it's an old story. Another example, like we talked about in the last video, Macedonia being named, the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia being renamed to North Macedonia. That's happened going on probably 8 times now in the last 2 years. Going back to the topic I was bringing up, the circumstance that is going on as we speak concerning the Likud party. Right now, there's still a lot of these things are in flux from 1 minute to the next. They will tell you, oh, the elections are on, then they're not, then they're on again, then they're not, then they're on again. And the main reason that all of this came about in the first place was because of the fact that in the Gaza Strip, right previous to this happening, the IDF had to go in there for some reason. And essentially their soldiers, be it if they were Shin Bet, because that's probably who it was, the intelligence groups on the ground in Israel, or even possibly IDF members, whatever they may have been, they were in there dressed as the locals so that they blended in and somebody figured out what was going on. And next thing you know, gunfire erupted and everybody knew they were there. That was the big thing that pushed all of this into the direction it went in the first place. And while that was happening, I believe it was the defense minister, I don't remember the exact title of that person, had said that they were done and walked away. And then they started fighting back and forth and back and forth as to who is going to run what part. Netanyahu can't be in control of everything, yet somehow he managed to gain control of everything here before it went out of the recycle bin in the news cycle, which it will end up in the recycle bin again here in the next couple of weeks. Just watch. Unfortunately, this is not predictive anything. This is just from watching what's been happening. So is that Likud situation with Netanyahu's election and all that coming up here going to actually be a major scenario, circumstance of something we have to keep an eye on? I would definitely say so. Is it actually going to make it to April? Well, that's the big thing up in the air right now, because one thing a lot of people don't understand concerning what's happening inside of Israel is the popularity of the Likud party is basically pretty much right near the top. And anytime any other party tries to come in and run, or if they try to bring in another candidate, there's always something getting in the way, and the Likud just ends up back on the top again. And I mean, we could even go into, if I really wanted to, which this is not the time, how Netanyahu initially got elected his very first time after what happened there with the prime minister in Israel at that point in time. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And hand that back over to whoever wants it.
Well, Brian, we need to talk about this because we haven't yet. So I want you to definitely give us some commentary on that. Matter of fact, we've been prevented from speaking on it. The time that you and I we're going to address it. Of course, the whole system crashed. But it's about time that we talk about this, because this is pretty serious. Ladies and gentlemen, January 16th, 2019, this was the headline in Reuters. U.S. sees Palestinian state on most of the West Bank, some of East Jerusalem. The source was Israeli TV. This is completely off the charts, and the thing about it is, this is not in this entertainment cycle of the news phase. It seems like this is what they are getting at. This is what they intend to do. And of course, the Jews will do it. Anything for sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Anything. And the problem is that Brian and I discussed this would probably what would be coming about. And it's released. No one is talking about this, Brian. And you need to come on and give us some commentary. You're the one that caught this, and you're the one that sent it to me. And when I read it, I was just like, Brian, this is exactly what we discussed. I think, well, months ago, we talked about this possibly being the exact game plan they were going to have. So, with that in mind, Brian, what's your thoughts on this news article now, right in the midst of Greece, okay, the Prince of Greece getting stirred up, right in the midst of, the Prince of Persia being just poked with sticks at every available opportunity. Just this entire quagmire we've got going on. What's your thoughts, Bri?
Well, what are my thoughts? Well, that's just it. And I mean, there's a reason specifically why we covered those exact news stories. And you sort of, how would I state that? Illustrated that for everybody before my answer right on the mark. My take on it, something I've never publicly stated. Well, it's quite simple. It was the combination between catching that article, which was a Jerusalem Post article, and then about 2 seconds later, after I went over and started checking through my standardized sources, which was Reuters is obviously number one, that was sitting there in broad daylight. Well, you look at the article itself, there is one specific scripture that should jump out at you immediately, and that is that they shall divide the land for gain. Now, everything that they're doing there, that they have written into what was in those news releases, what is the prospective Trump peace plan for Israel, because, of course, that's kind of what's happening now. They always just keep dropping little tidbits out to the public to see what their take is on these things. As far as
to get your gears turning again, how long ago was when they shut off all the utilities to the Palestinians, Brian? We've been having all these protests and uprisings there. It's almost like we was prepped. This spark has already been triggered. Everybody knows, well, outside of this entertainment news cycle, they're not being told what's really happening with the power being shut off. They had water cut off to them. So all this was a series driving the issue toward that Temple Mount. It was almost like this is what had to eventually happen. This is where they were going to go, and it's been driven in that very direction. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And the circumstance you're bringing up is actually, you see, here's what most people don't understand about what is happening in Israel right now, anyways, from the standard layperson that hasn't at least studied what's going on in world geopolitics and all that good stuff. But the main spots of contention within Israel are obviously the Gaza Strip, which is controlled by Hamas, who is Hamas. They are an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's what's happening in there. But you have three other total groups in there as well that are different terror affiliates that are getting money brought in from Iran, connections to Hezbollah. A little more to this, but keeping it simple. Have the West Bank, like we brought up. We've talked about in programs in the past, all the real estate dealings that were going on in the background with Jared Kushner, Donald Trump, and I believe it's Jason Greenblatt off the top of my head. That's the other guy that's been part of the talks for the peace process. There's been all sorts of strange things going on behind the scenes that you're not going to see just on a standard scanning of the news, but you do a search for it and you'll start getting hits from reliable news sources. And then there's the Golan Heights, and that's a really hotly contested topic at the moment because they keep bringing that in to the debate for the upcoming peace talks as well. Now, what has been happening as far as payments getting cut off? Well, that's in the Gaza Strip, folks. Now, what was happening previously was Qatar was basically either they were sending it or via proxy were sending the money to the Palestinians, and somebody steps in the middle, cuts it off, says, you can't have it. Then all of a sudden they say, you can have it. And they start getting it, and somebody steps in and says, you can't have it no more. The last thing I just said has just happened here within the last week. Bare minimum is when I believe I saw that. But what was going on there with the situation with Qatar and with them cutting off that funding? Well, this is even more complicated because most people don't realize that the reason that the Gaza Strip blockade came about in the first place, where they fenced it in, all the stuff started happening with Egypt and all that. And, after Hamas had formed, and folks, there's actually documentaries out there on Like Amazon Prime is one place where I caught them, and I think you can even find some of these freely posted on some of the other sites that people usually watch videos on about what happened when Hamas took over. But the big thing that most people are not aware of is that it's the PLO's new leader. I believe it's a boss off the top of my head again. Sorry. Essentially was one of the main reasons why all those different blockades got put into effect. And I mean, that's a generalized term because we're dealing with the financial blockade, obviously, but they're being blocked from having anybody coming in from the seaports. They have openings into Egypt, but if you pay attention on a weekly basis to that as well, you're going to notice they keep getting shut and open and shut and open, depending on, see, here's the big little one I'm going to sneak in to see if anybody catches it. While they're in the midst of having peace talks with Egypt. Yes, that's who Hamas has been dealing with, and that's who Israel, they have been trying to force Israel to deal with the Egyptian talks via proxy. And of course, you know, this adds in complications. And so between all of those factors, when you've got the PLO putting in all these blocks towards money coming in, and then all these first person, third person, second person proxies working in the midst of it, it's just a scenario that's going to continue to, how would you say this? It's just going to continue to spiral on a daily basis. So I don't personally see this altering too much here in the future as far as what's happening within the Gaza. That time is going to tell. What is really going to happen with his peace proposal that we caught out of Reuters or Jerusalem Post? Once again, we'll have to see when they release it. They've got everybody on standby. They keep releasing little bits. We're not really going to know much. But my first take from, like, again, what you asked initially, they shall divide the land for gain. The real estate that we talked about last year in programs that we did in audio, that's definitely in the forefront as well. It's just ridiculous. There's so many factors that are going into this whole scenario that it would almost take 2 hours of discussion just to iron out this little topic by itself.
Well, Brian, unfortunately, let's let the rubber hit the road, shall we? You can bet your bottom dollar, ladies and gentlemen, that if the Temple Mount is offered to Israel, they'll give the West Bank. They'll give the Gaza Strip. They'll give even the Golan Heights, which, if you control the overlook of the Golan Heights, you can obliterate all of Israel from the pinnacle of that point. Everybody knows this. All you have to do is just bring up maps and look, particularly an elevation map. It presents itself quite plainly. Make no mistakes about it. If you offer the Temple Mount to the Jews, they'll exchange anything for it. Anything. And, well, the unfortunate thing about that is those governments run, well, exactly like ours do. Exactly like ours do. And if you think all those Muslims are going to listen to their elected officials, boy, have we all got another thing coming. All of this would explode momentarily. And the first chapter of Zechariah will prove that. And this could just take place. Actually, we wouldn't find out about it till the next day. Because you realize if such a deed was done, it would happen in the middle of our nighttime. And we would get up the next morning, and that's when we'd find out about it, after the world trigger had already been tripped. Brent, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I'm going over my notes here, not the notes that everyone else has, and I decided to shorten them up just a bit because I've added something else that I think is more important. I know I've taken a lot of time. I believe the information is worth it. I thank you both very much. I know just how much you have given to let me have this time. On January 28th, 2011, at about 1 a.m., a light, I consider it an angel, in my opinion, came down over the Temple Mount. 7 years exactly, 2,520 days to within the hour of the United Nations vote whether to accept Trump's declaration of Jerusalem being its capital. And the vote was on December 21st, 22nd, 2017, to not allow Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. The light over the Temple Mount is a no-fly zone. It's the most contested, it's the most contested piece of property on the planet, especially if you can consider heaven owning it. It has been said that this video is fake. It is shot from 5 angles. It would be very hard to fake it. And for me, the sign of 7 years to the day of that light over the Temple Mount, landing on the exact day that the world said, no, we don't want you, Jerusalem, as the capital of Israel, is more than enough proof that it was real. Now, I've shown you a lot of signs. I hope that you grab the notes. Considering all the signs and the harbingers in the heavens that I've shown you, I tell you, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. So what are we looking at here? Luke 21:25, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Perplexity, the state of being very confused because of something is difficult to understand. Confusion. 2 Timothy 3:1, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. Perilous, dangerous, serious, unsafe. Matthew 24:21, for then shall be great tribulation. This is Jesus' words. Such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. Tribulation, great trouble and suffering. So let's put this all together and put it in perspective. These signs are pointing to the last days. These signs are the signs in the heavens that say the days are upon you, that it will be a time of confusion with serious danger and great trouble and suffering, at a time such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. Please, somebody fall out of their chair, get on their knees, open a Bible. You know, Matthew, the people who listen to you, they are they're up on things. They've listened to you. They listen to people that you've allowed to speak. It's the lost. It's these things can be shown to others later. Folks, if you're listening to this, share it. If you agree with it, if even one of these signs pricks your heart, your mind, your interest, share it. You might say, I've heard all this before, but what can I do? Besides, we're going to go be raptured before this all takes place anyway. Well, if I'm allowed to continue, there should be 2 more shows. And I'm going to show you things that might change your mind about the signs that Jesus warned about. At this time, I'm going off the notes that Matthew might see. It was a lot of math. It was showing that people who understand or know about Armageddon, some of them are in fear of it. Half the world's population will be decimated before the Battle of Armageddon. 1 out of every 2 people, at least. This happened to me, and it's a true story. I'm going to end with this, after this in one scripture. But it is so poignant that I added it because I felt like God put it in my life for this reason. True story. Yesterday, while I was at work, I saw a coworker, a 30-year-old woman standing in an aisle who wasn't working that day. As I approached her, she raised 3 fingers. I said hello and asked about the 3 fingers. She said, stage 3 breast cancer. After talking a while, she explained that when the lump first appeared, that she thought it was from a strenuous activity that she had done. And as time went on, she thought that it was from that old injury and working out. There were signs. She saw them, wrongly recognized them as something else. Didn't give it enough attention. When she went to the doctor, did he try to scare her about all the horrible things that was going to happen to her? No. And I'm not trying to scare you either. He explained that he had seen these signs before. And then he would, give her all the information that he had to make it easier on her. The doctor could have told her that everything was okay, even though it was not. He could have said that there was nothing wrong and that she shouldn't have to worry about all the signs she was feeling and seeing, and that her future was bright. True story. But if he did, he would have been lying to her and let her die. Matthew, you give me a voice. It's not life and death. It's soul and eternity. If you love someone, or if you care for someone, or if you can help someone, hopefully you can. I hope that somehow this opens somebody's eyes someday, if not tonight, and if not one of your loved ones. And I read a passage, Ephesians 4:32. And be ye kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. Gentlemen, I hope that we can do this again. God bless you both. God bless everybody who's listening. That's any questions, whatever. I'm here, but I think I'm done. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brent. You know, what else should I say? What else should I do to get your attention? You're going to live forever. And you all need to know that. You can either be in God's good graces or not. Forever. Forever. And what Brent has presented tonight with these seculas of time should get your attention that maybe you just got the warning signs that you maybe need to reevaluate what you've been doing and how you've been acting. With that in mind, let's get Brian's closing comments.
My closing comments. Looking over your material that you've set up for these outlines, there's a lot in here, a whole lot. And after sitting down and taking the time while I'm looking at the phone while you guys are doing the audio and video back and forth and going through this, yeah, I can see there's definitely room to do a lot more with what you've written up here over the course of time. So I'm rather interested in doing another one of these someday here in the future by any means. So, we'll leave that up to you here.
Well, Brent, you certainly, you ask for two. You can have as many as your heart desires. Brian and I can hook this up lickety split. Ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, Scotty don't have anything on the Bry. It's amazing what he's did here tonight. So we started out tonight and Brent didn't even know how to access his email from his phone. And yet we just did a live broadcast, video, the whole 9 yards, graphics. So Brent will certainly be joining us again as soon as the kinks for that gets worked out. I'm sure the Bry will let you all know. But all of this is obviously going to be available on the Bands of Time, probably on End Time Tribune Media as well. But you better keep a sharp eye on the Bands of Time Twitter. I'm sure that's where Brian will post it first. So who knows what Brian's going to do with this. He might take the audio and put it up somewhere. Doesn't matter. It's going to go multiple places. And I am very grateful for Brian's hard work. He's half of everything I do, no doubt about that. But Brent, it has been a pleasure once again. Brian will get all of your notes that you wanted published, the PowerPoint, the whole 9 yards. It will be available. But ladies and gentlemen, just keep your eye on his Twitter feed You'll see when it comes live, he'll post it there first, I'm sure. So, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, expect to hear from Brent again, because it's obvious that the amount of data that he's collected, it's only building, and it's not going away. So, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. God bless. Godspeed.